All right. Well, hi there, everyone. This is Hillary Topper here for We Are Triathletes, and we have a great webinar today. This Colin Cook from Peak Triathlon Coaching is here with us to teach us all about the bike. And without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Colin.
All right, thank you, Hillary. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get us into presentation mode, and we'll be good to go. So, all right, so yeah, basically we're going to go through different things. I've got some super high level kind of intro kind of things that we'll talk about, and then we're going to get kind of detailed with some things around power and stuff like that if we have time, and depending on how Hillary guides me here. So we'll see where we go here. So, all right. So as far as, Peak Triathlon Coaching, that's the name of my business. We've been around for since 2010. We're really all about, helping multi-sport athletes and age groupers, and not necessarily the professionals and things, and focused on, us, all of our coaches are age group athletes themselves, and they understand the lifestyle and things like that most of our clients and things live. So we really, focus on that piece of it, and, that there is more than life in triathlon, and, that we want to make sure we have time for our families and to do other things and to really enjoy the journey and so forth that comes around that. So won't spend too much time there, but that's kind of our motto there. And then specifically with myself, so I am a USA Triathlon, an Ironman, USA Youth and Junior coach. And then from a athletic perspective, I'm a 12-time Ironman finisher, done Kona 4 times, done pretty well at the half Ironman distance as well. And got into the Xterra game last year, and been having a lot of fun with that as well. But most importantly, I'm happily married, and got my 4 kiddos over on the left there. So I got 3 boys. We got 5 years and 10 days amongst the 4 kids. So they're pretty tight in age, and it's a lot of fun. So the youngest is 5.5 months now. So it's crazy. So anyways, what we're going to talk about today is, the different types of bikes. We'll kind of go over that quickly here, but kind of explain a little bit difference primarily between the road and triathlon bikes. We'll kind of talk about bike parts and components and things, so you can get a little educated and understand some things around that. Very briefly going to talk about bike fitting, and more just going to stress the importance of that. Then we'll get into the fun stuff for me, the bike gadgets and computers, and we're going to talk a little bit about race fueling setup and just how we may want to consider setting up our bike, especially for long course races and training and so forth. And then we'll get into some aerodynamics and speed recommendations. And then give you a couple example workouts and some little tidbits and some things to think about. So that's the game plan here. So all right, so when we talk about different bikes, I'm going to start with a mountain bike. So, for those people that are new to the sport, and especially if you're doing some of the shorter distance races, there's absolutely nothing wrong with showing up on your mountain bike. All right, you'll see a lot of people out there on mountain bikes. You see this one here. It's got really beefy tires and things. That's probably not going to do you any favors out there on the road. And, I may want to recommend switching over to some more like slick and more road-esque tires to help you go a little bit faster at the same effort. But, whether you got a hybrid bike, beach cruiser, whatever it may be, that's perfectly acceptable for races. And, go out there and make sure you enjoy the sport. And it's something you want to continue maybe before you consider investing into maybe the next thing would be a road bike. All right. So plenty of people racing, even Ironman distance races on road bikes, so that's a very acceptable option. And, when compared to a triathlon bike, outside of training for triathlons, a road bike can make a lot more sense than a triathlon bike, right? Because if you ever want to go out for a ride with your kids or do a recreational ride and things, it's much more challenging to do that on a triathlon bike because of the way they're set up and things. So road bikes are a great option. The next one I have in here is a road bike that's set up as a triathlon bike. All right. So, it's basically adding the aero bars, and but it still has the same geometry. Certainly for the ITU and the draft legals type of racing, that's kind of more the traditional bike that you'd see where they just do the clip-on aero bars. But people, especially even on hilly courses and things, people actually seem to can like the road bike with just clip-on aero bars better than doing a full-blown triathlon bike here. And I'll give a quick shout out to SIPO. That's a company that I work with. So that's the bikes I chose here for the pictures, because really like them and want to showcase them real quick. But anyways, so this is their high-end triathlon bike. You can spend a lot of money on these things if you want to. Doesn't mean you have to. And I always say it's more about the engine that's pushing the bike than it is about the bike itself. But when you see a traditional triathlon bike like this, right, and when we compare this to a road bike, you can see that this down tube here, the angle there is a little bit set back, and ultimately when you're looking at a triathlon bike, it's meant for you to be in these aero bars here, right? So you're leaned a little bit more forward, and it's geared to have you in that position the majority of the time. So if you're on an aero bike and you're riding upright on the hoods, or up on the other bars here the entire time, you're probably better off having a road bike, because you're really not getting to take advantage of the aerodynamics of running the aero bars and whatnot. But when you compare the two, the biggest difference again is that positioning, and you can manipulate a road bike to be able to have that ability to still have the aero bars and get into the aerodynamic position, but it's not necessarily catered and built, with that direction in mind. So yeah. Oh, I can't hear you, Hilly. Sorry, I can't hear any of your audio.
Sorry about that. We're having a little difficulty hearing you. I don't know, there's interference. Maybe you want to check that on your end.
Okay. Does that sound any better?
Much better. I'm going to mute myself
a little
now.
bit closer. Sorry. Okay. All right. So yeah. So that would be the difference here in the bikes and things, and really depending on what your goals are and what you're using the bike for, all these could be very well viable options for you. All right, so won't spend too much time here, but just want to kind of go over some of the major components and things, so that if you do go out for that group ride and things, and it's good to understand what your bike's all about and what components and things make up the bike, right? So you got your things that most people are kind of familiar with, your handlebars, your seat posts and your saddle. You've got your wheels with your rim and your tires on it. And then we're going to talk more about your actual group set and your components here in a minute. But you've got your crank here, your derailleur and fun things like that. So this may be just a good reference for you to have later. I won't speak to it too relatively straightforward and spelling it out here, but thought that was definitely worth mentioning and worth exposing here for people to make sure they understand the little things about what actual pieces make up their bike. All right, so when we get into drivetrains here, there's three different styles or companies ultimately that are making these. So Shimano is definitely the front runner there, probably has the most, very closely. Second would be SRAM. And then there's another company, Campagnano, that's an Italian company that you don't see quite as much up, and they're often referred to as Campy. But those are really the three different component styles. And depending on wheel sets and different setups and whatnot, you do need to make sure that certain things are compatible with, that drivetrain that you've chosen. So, you may, if you're looking for race wheels or something like that, may it say Shimano / SRAM, compatible and not Campy compatible and different things like that. So when they're referring to those, they all have their different features and are similar in most ways, but do have a little bit difference to them. Shimano has a bunch of different group sets, where Tiagra is one of their lower end solutions that, still is a good set of components and whatnot, but then you can go all the way up to their Dura Ace, which is, and then their DI2, which is the automatic shifting and things. For those that aren't familiar with DI2, and it's definitely an expensive component, and but I highly recommend that you consider it. For my own experience, I was one that when it first came out, I was like, I can shift my gears just fine with my levers, and didn't really see the value. But after I did get an upgrade on a bike and was given those components, it was really amazing to me how beneficial they were, especially for triathletes. The one thing I really like is, with a traditional triathlon bike, you have your shifters up on your aero bars, or potentially, if you're on a road bike, they're on the bell horns there. But then that means you don't have the shifting on the aero bars. And with the DI2 or SRAM's ETAP, which is their electronic shifting version, both of those you can have shifting on both the bell horns or the drops as well as on your aero bars. So that can really come in handy, especially if you're on a hilly course and you're switching between, riding upright and in the aero position. But the other beauty thing about that is once it's configured and set up properly, it literally makes shifting perfect all the time. So, a lot of times when you don't have electronic shifting, you have people that drop their chain a lot and things get out of whack. And, certainly your chain's going to stretch and whatnot and can cause some things over time. But I'd highly recommend, thinking about, and that's really what it comes down to with your drivetrains is the setup, so we're going to have different cassettes. So depending on the gearing and the strength of the rider ultimately and what kind of course they're going to be participating on, they may want to have different cassette setups. So that basically it comes down to the number of teeth that are in each one of the cassette pieces there. Whereas, when we have less teeth, that's going to actually mean that we can, it's going to take more power basically to generate or spin those gears there and whatnot. So, the higher end riders are often riding with group sets that have the lower ratios there and whatnot. So that's a little bit on drivetrains there. Certainly let me know, anybody after, if they have any questions on any of that stuff. Also, just want to touch on the different pedal types and things. So, we have a few different, really the three most common, I would say, would be the look style pedals, which you see up in the top left. Oops, and for some reason my mouse is not exploding here, but in the top left there, those would be some kind of the Shimano and look style pedals, and then over on the top right would be the SPDs they're referred to. So a lot of spin bikes or mountain bikes is typically where you find those. So they're certainly a good option. They don't quite have, as you can see, looking at the cleats at the top of the page, they don't have quite as much access and surface area that you're touching with your shoes. So they are, depending on what you're looking for. And then down at the bottom there, you can see what are called speed plays, which is my preference for road and triathlon. It's, again, just a little bit different style of pedal there, but those are definitely going to be the three most common that you'll see out there. Then when it comes to shoes, some traditional road shoes are definitely going to be a great option. So we look at those orange ones up at the top here. Those are a really nice set of shoes. The one thing when it comes to triathlon is there's a couple factors or things that may not necessarily be ideal for that. And one being the ratchet strap kind of top strap that it's using there. So if you're trying to do something and put those on very quickly, it's going to be challenging to do so. So you may want to consider that if you're getting into triathlon, whereas, you look at that bottom pair there, I guess you can't really see necessarily it's strapped over Velcro to the other side, but those are set up to be very easy to get in and out of. They actually have on the back there, you can see that's a BOA strap there that can be released so that the rear portion of the shoe there actually folds back, so that it's actually made for people that leave their pedals on the bike and want to be able to jump in, leave their pedals on the, leave their shoes, on the bike, and then be able to jump on their bike and then put their feet in while they're riding. But also another thing to consider with the triathlon shoes is most of them have a little irrigation system where there's a little bit of hole that down at the bottom in the sole that'll allow the water to leak out. Whereas if you look at that orange pair up top, those probably are not going to have that. And so, if you have wet feet, it's going to stay in there like a sponge and just remain in there. So just something to consider with those. And then for my mom's sake here, I have to say that I highly do not recommend the toe cages. Unfortunately, she was actually out on her bike with one of her friends 7 or 8 years ago now, and her friend fell in front of her, and she ended up going down. And unfortunately, the pedal ended up, or foot remained inside the cage because it doesn't come out like the clipless pedals over there on the left, or the cleats, I should say. So even though you can wear regular shoes with those, because they're not, I kind of consider the clipless over on the left there to be kind of like ski bindings, right? Whereas when you go down, they're going to automatically, export you from them and get your foot out of there, whereas the toe cages don't do that. So while they're definitely more economical, I would definitely not recommend or strongly consider what the repercussions for those could be here. So, all right. When it comes to bike fit here, I'm not going to get into specifics. You can see here that this person in this picture was, they were looking at all the different angles and things like that, which are extremely important. But more the emphasis to me would be that you have somebody professionally fit you. Especially if you're getting into long course triathlon, you need to have a properly fit bike, or you're really, really asking for trouble, whether it be knee issues, all kinds of different issues can be generated by not being in the proper position. So, it can be expensive. Some of the places around me that are very highly ranked, you're paying $300-400 to get, a proper fit, but most times it's usually, a couple hour process, and they really do a phenomenal job of making sure that you're in a position that makes sense for you. It may be a little bit overkill or them trying to stay in business, but a lot of them do recommend that you go in and you actually should be refit 2 times per year. Again, that may be a little bit aggressive, but I do think that looking at least once a year is worthwhile. A lot of them will give discounts if it's a second fit or, a continued fit and whatnot, but being in that position and then hopefully being able to maybe get a little bit more aerodynamic over time and things. But hands down, comfort has to be the number one priority, and you have to be in a position that's going to be healthy for you. And, again, hopefully you can improve on that with time, but do yourself a favor and get a proper bike fit. All right, so moving on to gadgets here. So I would highly recommend on the bike having at least some kind of bike computer. So whether it's a very low end one here, I think you can literally get some of these on eBay for like $5 or $10. It's pretty crazy, where, they're just showing basic speed. I would recommend if you can at least get some kind of cadence sensor. I think that's a really good idea. Not to get too far off on a tangent, but I'm a very, very big fan of tracking your cadence on the bike and allowing you to dictate when you need to shift your gears. So for example, if you're, shooting for a cadence of 90, let's say, and you're on a rolling terrain course, if you start to go up an incline and your cadence starts to decrease, that's going to be a very good indicator that it's a time for you to shift into an easier gear, right? Same thing on the other end. If you start to go down a decline or, your cadence is increasing, that means that it's time to shift into a little bit harder gear here. So, being able to track your cadence and whatnot is really beneficial and can really help you to dictate, when you should be shifting and riding more efficiently. More advanced computers here can definitely help you as well. So this is a bunch of the different Garmin Edge series computers here, where they all have a lot of the similar technology. Some of the ones on the top right there may not necessarily be able to have the Ant Plus technology, it's called, that can that allow you to connect either your heart rate strap or your power meter and other different gadgets and things. Even lights these days use that Ant Plus technology. But even for those that may have, like a 910, 920, 935 XT or something, a wristwatch, triathlon watch, I do try and recommend my clients get a bike specific computer, just because, they have the mounts where you could mount your watch onto, your bike somewhere or something. You can leave it on your bike, unfortunately, and forget about it as you head out for the run is one drawback there. But the numbers are pretty small on those, and it's hard to read them, especially when you're trying to look at, power numbers and things. So having a bigger computer and some of the higher end ones can help you with, mapping. You can see that bottom right one there has a map where, you can put in a course and it can give you directions and do a lot of neat things like that. But having a good bike computer, I think is a good value for a lot of people. So then moving on to power meters. So I could spend days speaking about these, and so I'm not going to really do it justice here. But I would really recommend, if you're serious about, triathlon or cycling, that you consider getting a power meter. So what a power meter basically does is it exploits out what your power, your effort level is in the form of wattage. So what it can do is tell you exactly how much effort you're putting out. Where that really comes in to value there is a couple examples here. One being, let's say you're doing, even just a 10-second interval, an all-out effort, right? If you're gauging that based on your heart rate, you actually should have your highest heart rate in that interval, and like second 11 or 12 are actually after the interval is finished. Whereas with power, that's going to come and it's going to instantly give you feedback into what your effort level is. And then it's going to allow you to stop that effort, exactly at that 10 seconds there. And you can be able to indicate, where exactly you were during that interval. And then, you can tone it back. When that gets translated to actual racing, a lot of times with your heart rate, right, you're going to be at a lower heart rate as you start out on the bike, and you're not as less fatigued. And then as you fatigue, your heart rate's going to continue to rise. So you very well could, from a power perspective, you could be putting out a lot more power than you think you are at the beginning, and you're seeing that your heart rate is lower. But because you're kind of overexerting yourself there, you may really pay for that later on in the ride, and then certainly into the run. Joe Friel, very popular triathlon coach that wrote the Triathlon Bible, he actually one time referred to the power meter as cheating on the bike, because, it allows you to really have a deep understanding of your effort level. And, I like to say it really can help tone you back a little bit at the beginning of the race, and then it can help you to push yourself a little bit at the end. So these are just some different options. So there's, it used to just be Power Tap is a brand that had the hub-based Power Tap was really one of the most common ones for a long time. But now you can get them in the spindles of your cranks, in your crank arms, and then now in the pedals. So there's just more and more options, and now because there's so many options, the price is coming down a lot on them. So I would really strongly recommend people consider a power meter if they're looking to improve and become more efficient with their riding and racing. And then just quickly, can't really talk about bikes these days, especially as people on the East Coast, or Northeast, we'll call it here, I think mostly, where we spend a lot of times indoors because of the lovely winters we have around here. And, that's a Wahoo Kicker, it's called, which is one of the new kind of more cutting edge bike trainers that can do a lot of really cool things. It does have a built-in power meter, but it's very smooth ride and can help you with interval training and things. So, having a smart trainer, they call it, can really be beneficial to you as well. All right, so this is kind of an old school picture. I couldn't find exactly what I wanted here, but this should suffice here, just to give you an idea on some things that you may want to consider when you're setting up your bike. So the first thing, especially if you have aero bars on your bike, that aero bottle that sits between those can be really beneficial, especially in long course, where, on an Ironman course, you have an aid station every 10 miles or so. And that can give you the opportunity to, just not have to carry, so many bottles with you and things, because you can grab a bottle on the course and then just pour it into your air bottle, get rid of that bottle there, and be on your way. Personally, I like to carry all my own fluids and things on the bike. So what I do is I actually carry little canisters of the nutrition products that I use, and then I'll grab water at the aid station, I'll pour it into my aero bottle, and then I'll dump that little tube into the aero bottle to give me the sport drink and things that I want. So I guess I'll just go out and say it. I'm not really a big fan of Gatorade, which is on most of the nutrition, you know, on the Ironman courses, and that's allowed me to get away from having to use that and some of the lower quality products that can come back to bite you on the run when you have GI issues and things. But you notice this person has about 20 gels taped across the top tube there. You may not necessarily need that many, but it's definitely a good way to track and hold your nutrition if you have a lot of things here. And then you notice the rear bottle cages there. I try and get away from those when it comes to racing, but at least for training and things, it's an essential tool when you're going out for long rides to be able to carry all the fluids and things that you need. And then also there is the bento box, up towards the front near the stem there that is a great way to hold some nutrition and things as well. So lots of options to really load yourself up when it comes to your nutrition and whatnot. All right, so here's a image of me in the wind tunnel here. So I've done some wind tunnel testing quite a bit over the years, and when you starting to get serious about the sport, aerodynamics can play a huge, very, very, very important when it comes to your ride. When you're riding 56 or 112 miles, those little things and the coefficient of drag, they call it, and trying to reduce that coefficient of drag can really make a big difference. So, certainly something that it becomes more and more relevant as you're going faster. Some people get a little skewed by these results, and they say they've been wind tunnel tested with these products. Excuse me, that's my 5.5-month-old taking a little nap over here. We have really a lot of these tests are done at like 25 or even 30 miles an hour and things. So when you see these graphs and things, just be weary of and kind of look into what they're actually testing, because not many of us are riding at 30 plus miles an hour out there on the course, right? So just keep that in mind a little bit as well. But as you do try and progress, if you're on a road bike, aero bars are definitely going to be the most cost-effective free speed that you can get. So they say that, and again, it depends on how fast you're going. But having aero bars can add a mile or even 2 miles an hour onto your speed. So it's important to be able to have that option there when you want to try and up your game. The next thing there would be an aero helmet. So you notice here that I'm wearing a long tail aero helmet, and really the whole point of these helmets is to have that airflow continue right onto your back. So there is helmets out there. I'm not going to name out any of the brands, but that have the short tail, and they don't end up really doing a very good job of carrying that wind over onto your back. So while of course these aero helmets look super cool, they do actually have a purpose, and make sure that you get something that actually is relevant and is going to fit properly for you. Long tails seem to work a lot for most people, but that's an important piece there. And then lastly, everybody's got their way, or shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people think that race wheels are the way to go, and they're certainly very important. And when you can reduce the weight of your wheels, that can significantly help with speed and whatnot. But I would just consider that a lot of people can spend their money better elsewhere, because if you're on your speed's not significantly high, they're really not going to help you a ton. I would recommend getting a power meter or something like that, so you can become stronger on the bike before spending a couple $1,000s on these race wheels that, and even when you're on a hilly course, they really may not benefit you that much. So they definitely have their place, and they're beneficial when you get up into those high speeds, but I would definitely look into the aero bars and the aero helmet before you do the race wheels. All right. So we're running up against it here, taking a little longer than I thought here, so I'm not going to spend too much time here, but this is called a critical power file, or a CPC worksheet here that can help calculate what your FTP is, your functional threshold power. So when you have a power meter, this can help you to be able to actually leverage it properly. So basically, with the people that I work with here, I have them do a 3-minute test, and then I have them do a 20-minute test. And I'd be happy to share my protocol with anybody that's interested. But we basically look at that 3-minute power and that 20-minute power, and we see how they compare to each other. And if we have a super high 3-minute power and a very low 20-minute power, then that means that we need to focus a little bit more on the endurance piece of things. Whereas vice versa, if your 3-minute power and your 20-minute power are nearly identical or very close together, that means we got to work on that top end power and trying to get, a little bit more of that high end speed that will ultimately translate into going faster over longer distances. But that, can be relevant. And, we want to constantly be testing to hopefully see improvements with our FTP. And that's how we're going to get faster and whatnot. And they've also just included some heart rate data in there as well. Very big fan of heart rate, as a secondary measurement when it comes to riding on the bike. And, that can be a good indicator of whether you need to make adjustments and things to your efforts on that given day. All right, so really quick here, I know hopefully we'll have these slides shared out here, so you can refer to these later, but these are just some examples of some different types of workouts. So a sweet spot workout is often when we're in that kind of 88 to 92% of our FTP, our functional threshold power. So, we're doing basically a warm up, doing some single leg drills to kind of work on that pedal stroke. Then we do a little bit of a progressive build to kind of get our energy levels up and nice and loose before we go and we hit it here with an 8-minute interval, at 88 to 92% of our effort and with a 2-minute recovery. And then we'd repeat that 2 more times. Then from a force workout perspective, so these are really trying to generate and increase that FTP and working on our efficiency a little bit with our pedal strokes. So, we're doing kind of evens and odds here where the evens we do at higher than or greater than 90 revolutions per minute. And then the odds we do at a lower cadence at under 85 revolutions per minute. And then we're doing those at our FTP, our functional threshold effort. And then last but not least would be a VO2 max workout. So these are really explosive, kind of all out. This is a nice little build here where you go from 10-second all out sprints all the way up to a 1-minute all out sprint. Really trying to work on that top end power, and that one is always a fun one, let me tell you. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions on those, but that's to give you some ideas of how you can leverage your power meter in your training to improve and whatnot. All right, so last but not least here, just some kind of general thoughts and tidbits here. So, just keep in mind, especially with long course triathlon, most athletes are spending, about 50% of their race on their bike. So, if you're looking to make improvements and gains, if you can increase your FTP or reduce your bike split basically because of improvements on the bike, it's really probably going to show dividends in your overall time. Also, the stronger the bike you are and the quicker you can get off the bike, the fresher you should feel for your run. So, don't ever discredit, the value in having a strong bike and how much that can help you to run better off the bike. Also just some somewhat simple things, but important, a clean bike is a happy bike. I always remind my clients when they're heading into their races to make sure that they actually clean their bike. So, literally there are watts to be gained by having a clean bike and making sure that your drivetrain is nice and fluid and, decreased and running properly can literally make it so you don't have to put out as many watts that go the same speed. Tire pressure is extremely important. You should be putting air in your tires at least weekly, but depending on the terrain of the course, you may want to do some lower tire pressure, if it's a bit of a not quite as smooth of a ride. And then if, it is a nice smooth course that you're riding on, you can go with a little bit higher tire pressure. Lubing the chain, like I mentioned there a second ago, is really important and can help your components and your drivetrain last a lot longer. So make sure you're lubing your chain. And then, knowing how to change a flat tire is really important. Speaking from experience, somebody that's had multiple flats out there on a long ride and training ride. Loved ones do not enjoy coming to pick you up 40 miles from the house, let me tell you. So, being able to fix your own flat, and things do happen outside of your control, but even from a race scenario, yes, they have the sag wagon out there to help people, but if you're relying on them, you're probably going to be waiting for a while, and could really, be detrimental to your race. So do yourself a favor and learn that. I also like to talk about, learning how to handle your bike, and I like to call it driving your bike as opposed to just riding your bike, right? So when you're efficient on your bike, that means that you can spend less effort to go at the same speed, right? Sure, we always want to get stronger and put out more power, but if we can be more efficient and ride at lower watts and get the same speed, that's going to put us in a better position to run off the bike. So always learning how to, and trying to improve our handling and efficiency on the bike can go a long way. And then, just always making sure that we make our easy workouts easy and our hard workouts hard, right? This is a general kind of principle here, but especially on the bike, people end up kind of going out at that same speed and they're kind of sitting at the middle of their efforts all the time. And, if you're comfortable and that's where you want to be, then that's probably where you're going to stay. But if you want to really push yourself and get to the next level, you need to try and push really hard on those hard workouts and then really tone it back and make it easy on those easy workouts. If you do that, very confident you'll see some improvements there. And then, go out there and have some fun. We do have to spend a lot of time on our bikes, so we want to have the right mental attitude and make sure that we enjoy those workouts there. So, all right, I went a few minutes over here, so I'll skip through the hoorah here with Peak here. But we do have, I have myself and 8 other assistant coaches and things that would be happy to work with you here and help you out. But I think that's a high level here on the bike. Thank you very much, Hillary, and let me know if anybody has any questions or if anybody wants any clarity on anything. Please don't hesitate to reach out here.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah. I guess I always manage to go over a little bit.